morning, everyone. My name is Emily Fox. Sorry for the long introduction and the technical troubleshooting. I wanted to kick off by thanking all of our conference organizers who have taken time out of their very busy schedules to put together this event. It's not something that's very easy to do, and it does take a lot of hands to pull something like this off and get everybody together for a single day event, let alone multiple days, or even just a social hour, just a hangout. So thank you all, conference organizers and attendees, as well as our sponsors, for making this kind of event happen. So I wanted to start by talking about what exactly is open source and how do we get so many things done in the ecosystem in the community, and what are we actually referring to? Why is open source still successful? And there's a lot that goes into this, but Forrest Brazil probably summed it up best as a bunch of random people on the internet anonymously creating critical software, that little guy in Nebraska, if you see the XKCD comic, doing this all in their spare time, or if they're fortunate enough having their employer sponsor them for some portion of their time during the work week to contribute to these communities and ecosystems. And oh, by the way, companies are going to make a whole bunch of money doing this, making their customers very happy because they can use it for free, make it available for use to be modified and shared. And it's going to remain shelf stable for decades, and I mean decades. But this is honestly a little unrealistic. We talk about the tragedy of the commons a lot, and quite frankly, it's not so much of a tragedy as it is more about commonality. So how does this happen, and what do we do to actually sustain our technologies and our communities and ecosystems? I talk to a lot of open source project maintainers, contributors, members of open source ecosystems and foundations, and I cannot speak for everyone, but I can say that within CNCF especially, we've got this wonderful recipe that allows us to connect technology with people, that's led technology with people in a way that allows us to achieve outcomes that are not otherwise possible within organizations. And it's because of the individuals that are involved and the tactics, techniques, and skills that they employ to make that possible. Within the CNCF, we have the Technical Oversight Committee. It's a group of 11 technologists that are experts within their field. And they define a matriculation process or a moving levels process that allows us to perform due diligence of open source technology against the maturity of each of those software projects. We group this into 3 of the 5 technology adoption lifecycle phases that was first introduced in the CHASM model by Jeffrey Moore in 1991. And so far, we've had a lot of success doing this. Our matriculation process is successful because it's centered around the evolution of good engineering practices at each stage of a project's maturity. We can't reasonably expect every software project to come out of an engineer's brain fully fledged and developed with everything under the hood and all the things that you need to be able to adopt and integrate it into your organization. And the nice thing about this is we enact these engineering principles through criteria for moving levels that allow projects to own their journey of maturity and into adoption. And in some cases, even suggesting more refined and advanced criteria for them so they can strive for something better than themselves, even beyond the final stage of graduation. Sandbox projects are early, but not too early. They're innovative and experimental. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they succeed. But we want to evaluate them based off of their potential impact and value in the ecosystem. That could be that it's something new, like WebAssembly technology, or it could be something old, such as a service mesh, but they have a differentiator value. We are expecting them to have breaking changes, try to figure out what their release process is going to end up looking like, and continuously evolve and iterate based off of feedback that they're receiving from contributors in our community and ecosystem such as yourselves, as well as adopters that are early in trying to understand how to make best use of this technology. Incubating projects are not quite fully mature yet. They start to slow down in a lot of their changes. They're becoming more stable. Their APIs are slightly more fixed. But this is the first point in which the Technical Oversight Committee can actually evaluate these projects' adoption. Are they useful to the people that are interested in them? And graduated projects have reached the highest level of maturity within our ecosystem. They've been able to consistently demonstrate highly mature, evolved practices and have widespread adoption in their particular market area. They provide a high degree of confidence and guarantees in their stability, performance, security, and engagement with those adopters and contributors in the ecosystem. Now, archive is a stage that we don't actually talk about a lot, and I think that's probably because there's a stigma associated with it. However, there shouldn't be anything wrong with moving a project to archive. Sometimes we try things and they just don't work. They fizzle and burn out, and that is totally fine. We can point back to those projects and say, we recognize what that was, it worked for the time that we had it, but we've moved on. It could be that it's been overcome by other events or advances, maybe AI took over. And in other cases, they can't continuously demonstrate alignment with the CNCF's expectations for projects, which is also okay. We want to ensure that we have a healthy ecosystem that is undiluted, that projects are as they appear, and they're not doing anything that doesn't allow adopters to experience the full breadth of what's possible with that technology. And through the course of all of these due diligence evaluations, we are understanding and learning more about all the different ways that projects can operate into success. And we take those learnings and reincorporate them back into our due diligence process, so that as technology landscape evolves and changes, so too is our due diligence. And we have a variety of criteria when it comes to evaluating these projects. This is just a couple of top-line headings, but there's a lot more that goes into this. We want to make sure they align with our expectations. We want to ensure that they're well-engineered, that they are implementing best practices as they are evolving with industry and sustaining their community, not abandoning those contributors that show up. We want to make sure that they're openly governed. They should be self-governing with neutrality. Adopters come to our ecosystem because they want neutrality in their open source projects, and part of our task is to ensure that that is made possible, that they can engage in open public discussions that aren't driven by a single organization or entity, and that those community members have their voices heard in the project's direction. We want to ensure that it's maintained well and that it is managed accordingly with its governance practices. Can someone outside the project actually understand what it takes to be a contributor, how they can see themselves rising to a role such as a maintainer or a release lead? We want to ensure that they're facilitating contributions and engaging their community members in a healthy manner, not preventing contributors from participating, and ensuring the community is healthy from release to release. We also check that there's good engineering practices in place. We want to ensure that they're seeing not only growth within the project, but we want to check and see how they're paying attention to the ecosystem beyond themselves. Are they paying attention to new specifications that promote interoperability between these projects within a particular domain? And what is their approach to security? We've seen a lot of changes in the past decade in this rising tide of security, with supply chain attacks coming on and cloud native security actually evolving into more of a standard. And we've made it so easy to eliminate low-hanging fruit. We expect projects just to do it and get it done so they can move on to really cool and awesome things before another incident impacts us. But the real measure of progress for these projects is our adopter interviews. It's how we evaluate the adoption, the integration, the deployment process, as well as how an adopter could potentially engage with that open source project's community. We look at how adopters are leveraging these. It's the real test of open source technology, not only in that it works, but that it's viable in an operational context and addresses use cases that are meaningful to those adopters. We learn a lot of these. We learn a lot from these kind of adopter interviews. I mentioned previously that adopters want neutrality in projects. I cannot stress that enough. Consistency in the form of specifications allow adopters to make changes. If they want one project one day, they can make a change to another one if their requirements change. They need more stability. They need better feature enhancements. Neutrality in the direction of the projects themselves is also equally important. Our adopters should feel empowered to show up and contribute to a project's roadmap, to advocate for those features or bug fixes that are the most important to them. And we want to see the community respond in kind and assist in making sure that those changes show up in those projects. Another example of findings we get from adopter interviews is associated with the complexity of these projects. There have been numerous occasions where we have engineers who are really awesome and deep technical experts in their field, such as in the Linux kernel and doing security or eBPF, for example, and adopters struggle to actually integrate them because they lack the subject matter expertise to make the project truly successful. And in those cases, the TOC comes to the project after those adopter interviews are complete, and we provide guidance to them. How do you simplify the technology? How do you improve the onboarding experience and put more information out into the ecosystem so you can receive more adopters? In some cases, that might be implementing rule sets that allow them to ease on by a limited set of defaults, and as they grow in their maturity of using that technology, giving them more that they can turn on to get the most value within their organization. Ultimately, what we want to see project adopters succeed at is that crawl, walk, run experience, moving from development to integration and testing, and finally production. And we apply this to over 200 projects within the foundation. We have a lot of projects that overlap. I believe as of right now there are 6 service meshes within the ecosystem and only 2 of them are graduated. So we have a lot of projects with significant amount of feature overlap. But the nice thing is that it gives our adopters options. We understand that not every technology is going to work for everyone. If that was the case, OpenStack would still be widely popular and we would be running it everywhere. But such as it is, adopters like to have options and flexibility to them. So in our ecosystem, we let 1,000 flowers bloom. We like to see healthy competition amongst our open source projects because we believe that it allows us to establish a common need within a particular domain area and raise the bar of expected functionality for that particular technology to everyone's benefit. And we support and guide the ecosystem, and as well as our projects and adopters, by overseeing technical advisory groups. These groups perform a variety of functions, extending the technical expertise of the TOC. I mentioned we're a group of 11 individuals. Not everybody's a security expert, and not everybody knows networking as well as Lynn Sun. But we do have our tags, and our tags cover a variety of different domains, as you can see here on the screen. The nice thing about this is if you're new to the ecosystem and you have expertise in networking, but you're not sure which project you want to contribute to, Tag Network's an excellent place to start and get an overview of all the networking technology that exists in the ecosystem. Same thing with security. And each of our technical advisory groups have working groups that focus on a particular subdomain or technology. Within Tag Runtime, we have special purpose operating systems, for instance. So if unikernels are your thing, that's where you show up. And the nice thing as well is our projects mirror a very similar model. They have special interest groups, very similar. They perform, manage, and oversee certain aspects of these projects, such as release management or security features and vulnerability reporting for them. And both of these kinds of groups come together to provide expertise of a particular area, providing guidance to projects on what's the next thing that's coming in the industry that they should be paying attention to, even assisting projects in reaching out to more and more adopters to field feedback to build a better project. And many of them also develop best practices for adopters in understanding what does it actually mean when we talk about software supply chain security, and how can you do that within your organization, or how can you contribute fixes and features back to projects to ensure that they're delivering on the software supply chain security metadata value that you're looking for. You can think of the CNCF like every major organization, with a few noticeable exceptions. Our technical roles are not enforced by hiring and firing. We have to ensure that we are using our influence to drive the outcomes that we're looking for. Our ability to be seen as leaders and experts is driven precisely in how we engage and collaborate with others. That means our decisions and our work must be reasonable, neutral, and technically sound. We have to demonstrate how we arrived at a particular point in a manner that assists others in getting there too, so no one feels lost in the noise of over 200 projects in the landscape. The merit of our work and how we conduct ourselves is actually what is remembered. As you can imagine, this is especially critical for us. We have to be able to separate our personalities from the project so that our ideas live beyond us to an end that is an example of appropriate conduct within the ecosystem. Everything is open. Our code, our docs, our decisions are explained. You have the ability to independently inspect the due diligence I did on the last graduated project I moved forward. And part of this is because we cannot operate or collaborate within silos. We need to ensure that people have an expectation of interest that's not going to be gated by some mystical lead in the background, controlling and selecting who can receive what information to inform their decisions. We need to do this in a way that allows our engineers contributing to the ecosystem or maintaining our projects to make the best use of that spare time that they have available to them. And you all are empowered to participate. If we're missing something in our ecosystem, we don't just accept PRs. We accept your ability to participate in conference and events such as this, showing up to one of our technical advisory group meetings and asking questions. We strive to ensure that every single project and group has a door open to all contributors, and that our technical leadership principles are designed to guide those individuals in leadership roles and community members that allows them to empower participation for themselves and for others. And when I talk to contributors and maintainers that are new to the ecosystem or trying to figure out what to do next, I usually get comments like, I need advice to contribute to a project, here's my resume. That's great. I'm excited that you're willing to share that much information with a random person on the internet. Or, I want to grow in my career. How do I do that? That's not specific to a particular project or a technical advisory group, but those opportunities do exist in our ecosystem. And they want to join a CNCF to get a community for their project. How do they do that? Well, what they're really asking is, how do I get involved? How can I possibly lead effectively either in a project or in a group or even just with an idea for something I know needs to be fixed? And how can I collaborate better with others because what I'm currently doing isn't working? I don't actually recite the Zen proverb, but a lot of it has to do with just chop wood and carry water. What it means is that no matter how successful you are in your experience, there are some things that everybody has to do, whether or not we call it mundane, uninteresting, or just a fact of life. That could be brushing your teeth, it could be cooking a meal for your loved ones, doing your laundry, or ensuring you schedule your regular annual doctor's exam. You're welcome for the reminder. And in open source and technology, it's all the work that people put into these projects that make them successful. Setting milestones, holding meetings, building agendas, facilitating content and collaboration, getting those ideas out of individual contributors' heads into the common pool of knowledge in a way that is transparent and open. And when we operate in the open, we're doing work in common that lacks commonality because we don't have a shared experience. This requires us to establish knowledge that's useful for everyone in a way that we can all understand. What this means is you and your coworker, that friend that you brought with you to the conference, have a shared experience, some form of mutual understanding through your employer or through a past work experience. In open source, all of our employers are different. We're all international, we're all multicultural, and we need to be considerate of that as we're engaging in some of these technical discussions. We have to establish understanding and knowledge of our work in a manner that is approachable and accessible, allowing anyone to challenge our ideas, to ask questions in a manner and mechanism that improves our knowledge while checking any assumptions. So what works for you and your company culture may not actually work within open source. We have to separate our desire to dictate the how and think more concretely about the outcomes that we actually want to see achieved. Such as with programming language, we need to be declarative and not imperative. And this can present challenges to you if you're used to operating within the confines of your business. That challenge is that if you're not leading with a learning mindset, you're not creating psychological safety for yourself and for others that move projects towards inclusive outcomes. Leading with a learning mindset is a technique that encourages individuals to establish acceptable norms of behavior and builds a culture of a project or a group. It establishes an in-service-oriented mindset to the project and to its community for something greater than yourself. It invites discovery and innovation through understanding and mutual collaboration. You can ask open questions, not yes, no, so that you can seek an explanation and get that elaboration on their perspective and meaning. Restating and summarizing allows you to verify yours and others' understanding of any content that is being presented. It allows you to get everybody on the same page and aligns topics with potential motivation so that you understand why they're so concerned about software supply chain security and the fact that your release is not signed. This creates a pool of knowledge around the project, allowing us to amplify those feedback loops and drive continuous knowledge exchange, also improving the docs in the process. These techniques provide a kindness to everyone involved. You, as a contributor and maybe even as a technical lead of a project, are taking on the cognitive burden of that group to give focus to all of their activities. And this does two things for you as a leader. It establishes your rapport within an ecosystem separate from your technical acumen. How many people here are still programming in Fortran? No one. That's great news. And that is an excellent example of how technology evolves. The reason for this is because, like with all things in technology, we are expecting to see change, and it's how you establish yourself within an ecosystem and build trust that is more important than how many programming languages you have under your belt. And I bet every single one of you probably has at least one person in your organization that you can go to for anything, no matter what. It may not be their expert area, but you know and can rely on them to be that person that can help guide you to your next challenge or your next opportunity. The other thing this does is it allows you to establish the merits of your behavior and your inclusive actions within a community and ecosystem. They carry more weight than no matter how many lines of code you contributed to the most recent release of Kubernetes. No one's going to remember that. But what they do remember is the fact that you took time out of your day to walk a first-time contributor through their pull release and why the GitHub action failed, and guided them, not told them, on how they could potentially fix that. They'll remember you for your advocacy of junior engineers or individuals who are not well represented in the ecosystem, so that they have the opportunity to shadow senior maintainers and understand what it actually takes to maintain a critical, highly mature, graduated open source project that cannot introduce breaking changes to its adopters. With these skills in hand, you've created the basis for a project or a group's culture. You've set expectations of behavior, and you've created fuel for innovation in the process. And with the ability to fuel that innovation, you also have to be fluid, but to a certain degree. This means we need to be flexible, but recognize that there are occasions where we need to stick to our methods and understand the scope in which we're allowed to operate. These skills to fuel innovation are only as good as when you know when to apply them. Because we want to encourage individuals to participate and lead in our projects and groups, but not everybody wants to be a leader, just like not everybody wants to be a manager, and that is totally okay. We need reliable, consistent contributors to our project because they're the person that you can turn to that you know is going to get things done. And in addition to that, we also need to have fly-by-night contributors, those folks that show up to fix a bug from their 9 to 5 and then they disappear. That's great. As long as you can make it easy for them to show up and know where to go to make those fixes and changes and understand the process of a merge request, even better, because they take that burden off of you. They also bring an additional perspective from outside of your project. How many people know that we have some inside joke within an organization and everybody else has trouble getting it? It's just like that. You have to make it open to those new individuals who are not going to be around there forever so that they can get the work in that needs to get done, get it merged, and move on to the next thing. And all these help you spread the glue to keep a project and a community together. We need individuals in every single one of these roles for our projects and groups to be successful. Being fluid is all about orchestrating your projects and groups to success. You are effectively like Kubernetes. You are scheduling workloads for a project, building that roadmap, you're managing the work that needs to be done, balancing the load, configuring your governance for the latest technical dispute that happened within your project, and enforcing policies on contributions, making sure that those PRs are appropriately reviewed and looking for memory safety issues. You facilitate collaboration within your group as well as with other groups that they may touch on. You build yourself up to be that go-to person within the ecosystem, that person that's in the know and ensures not only everyone is aware of what those collaborations and contributions actually are, but you're facilitating the vision for how all the pieces actually work together. And that facilitation means driving open consensus and decision-making. The basis of open source is to modify and to share. This means your consensus and decisions are going to change. They have to be publicly accessible and they have to be independently understandable. Agreement is not a decision until it is fully documented. That means the context and the reasoning must be open. It allows it to be subject to modification and reconsideration when the original context for that decision actually changes. It also sets a precedence and allows it to serve as a reference for others. And how often have you had to reconsider a technical decision that you made because the information presented to you has changed? It might have been 2 months ago, it could have been 5 years ago. There are only 2 things in life that are certain: death and taxes. Everything else is revisited as technology evolves. That's why we still don't have Fortran being programmed every single day. And this is why we incorporate adopter interviews into our project engagements as a technical oversight committee member. We want to ensure that what worked 10 years ago, we know full well is not going to work today in our current security climate. We need to ensure that past decisions can be reassessed. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or that we're moving backwards. It means that we just need to turn around and consider a new change of perspective so that we can continue to move forward. This means it must be documented and it has to be well-formed, easy to understand, transparent. This is why we made the decision. Inclusive. Here's everything we've noted and considered that allowed us to arrive at this point. And external-centric, meaning we have to remove all the assumptions or state what they are because these decisions create a framework that empower contributors to exercise autonomy in their work for a project or a group. But why? In 2009, Daniel Pink, a native Washingtonian, delivered a TED Talk on the puzzle of motivation. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I highly encourage you to take 20 minutes out of your day today, this week, this month, and watch it. Because open source doesn't have a boss. There is no one constraining who can do what work. It's your willingness to show up and put in the work that is enough. And that is why it seems random. And we set our own timelines, meaning our work can be flexible. We can do it in our spare time, or if we're fortunate enough, have that employer sponsor us for maybe 8 hours a week, or 4 or 2. And it's not a checklist. It's not mechanical. It's not automatable. It's challenging. You have to set yourself aside in order to develop a series of practices and skills that are highly unique and valuable. And this is open source. This is leading in the open. It gives you purpose, it gives you autonomy, and mastery over yourself in a way that no certification or course will allow you to achieve. And remember when I mentioned that your business culture may not work in open source? The opposite isn't true, and it's really weird. Whenever someone joins the TOC or they become a maintainer of a project or they create this special role within their community where they are the go-to person, they get these highly valued, influential skills that businesses and organizations see as a team player, a critical thinker, someone who can think strategically, and someone who is a self-starter. It's because open source culture creates this universal base image that you can operate from, providing you with satisfaction that carries over into your work, even if you're not enthralled with your day-to-day. You perform better when your heart is in it or when you have something that you can go and put your heart into after. You feel different, and even if you aren't doing it in your job, that satisfaction itself can improve your mood and your engagement with others in an extremely stressful meeting. And it allows you to create a framework for how you can conduct yourself in your career and rise to the next level. In addition to those questions I mentioned previously, I wanted to share my first foray into open source. I talked about this in my keynote at Cloud Native Security Con, my baby conference. It was the first one that I started. And I showed up to a KubeCon in a tag security talk with a lot of questions. I was a government employee at the time, and I had learned that there was an open source group doing security assessments of open source projects. That sounded awesome to me. And the person that was presenting the information didn't have any answers for my questions. I was too detailed. So I went online to their GitHub, and I started reading, and I noticed that there were a lot of gaps in their documentation. And when I started asking more questions, and I didn't get any answers, I said, you know what? Why don't I just write the answers myself? And I submitted a PR, and we engaged in a wonderful discussion about what it was that I wanted to see change within the project. That got merged in, and I continued to do that level of effort. I got promoted into a technical lead role within the tag security, and eventually became a co-chair for that group that I had to depart early because I was nominated to join the technical oversight committee. These are all things that you can do. You can invite others alongside you in your journey within open source. And you don't have to have any experience in doing so. You just need to know how to say, yes, I will try. What have you got to lose? Just the opportunity to learn. I took it on, and so can you. You can chop some wood and carry some water.